from the heart. Let me take a few moments in this time that I have with you to discuss what I consider at this juncture an issue, as we are now in an electoral process that has become somewhat toxic, and the language is no longer civil, and the blame game is being used as a way to elicit support in the electoral process with both Hillary and Trump. We are seeing what we consider one of the most toxic electoral campaigns ever in American history. And even though we understand the perplexities of a world that seems to be out of order, that order seems to be lost across the globe. Our weather is out of order, our families are out of order, and our countries are out of order. Order is difficult to find, and there seems to be anxiety and panic on the part of politicians and persons to find reasons for the problems that exist in culture and in society. So when we look at this campaign process, which I'm sure will garner critique from the major thinkers and philosophers and historians of our time, who will critique for days, for years, the implications of this campaign. The one thing that I am certain of is that this campaign has become a campaign of blame and pointing the finger, and sometimes controversial statements that should never be made. I'm not going to weigh in as it relates to the candidate, but I do want you to know that I think that the blame game is a difficult and terrible game to play. But we live in a society that's litigious. People want to sue because there seems to be in us a need to blame other people for our situations. When we do that, then we find an opportunity to absolve ourselves from the responsibility of, one, bad choices, and two, not always taking into account what the ramifications and the consequences of our decisions are. So then, if that be the case, even in dealing with people, married couples in specific, when I have counseled them, they tend to find reasons to blame each other for each other's misery. Misery does love company. And so what is it that compels us to constantly need to find a reason or someone we can blame for where we are? I wanted to take that time to look at that because I believe that once we can become serious and honest about our choices and the decisions we've made, it's only then that we can move forward. And I think that blaming people is one of the most difficult things to get beyond. So I wanted to talk with you today about that whole concept of forgiveness of the past, of recognizing the dangers of the past. I think the better way to talk with you about it is related to a movie that I think is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's Tom Hanks playing Forrest Gump. Man, Forrest Gump is my hero. Forrest Gump is the guy, and Forrest Gump represents life in lived without blame. You never in the movie hear Forrest blaming anybody for the condition, and he becomes a defender of persons and individuals in the movie. But he has a love affair with Jenny, who was his childhood sweetheart. And eventually he waits until Jenny eventually comes back to him. And in the movie, Forrest and Jenny gets married. Well, as it would be, they were walking one evening, and they were walking toward the house that Jenny grew up in. When they got close to the house, the pains of the past began to merge with her present. And all of a sudden, Jenny became unraveled because she remembered that that house was the house of abuse. It was the house where pain was. And so consequently, she started running toward the house, picking up stones and rocks and throwing them at a house nobody lived in anymore. The house had been abandoned. The house was condemned. The windows were all broken out. Everything was dilapidated. The grass had grown up, but she was throwing because it made her remember, and it reminded her of her past. She was throwing, and eventually she falls to the ground in exhaustion. She was in an exhausted way, and she was on the ground still feeling, trying to find rocks. And so Forrest looks at her, and he says in his witful way, he looks at her, he said, "Well, Jenny, I guess you ain't got enough rocks." What a profound statement he makes, man. That was major. Forrest, with his implications, suggests that, Jenny, you're going to run out of rocks before you run out of past. You can't continue to look for reasons in order to destroy your life by blaming your past. Yes, horrors. Yes, hurt. Yes, pain. Yes, difficulty. But I hear in my spirit what the Apostle Paul says, "I count not myself to have apprehended. One thing I do, I forget those things that are behind it." I want you to ask in your prayer time, as you begin to evaluate your life, I want you to start praying, "God, help me to let it go, to let it go." One of the ways that I found that they caught monkeys in Africa, they would put a kind of food that it liked in a hand trap. The monkey would reach up through the trap and grab a hold of the banana or whatever the food was, and he would hold on to it. And sometimes they were known to hang for days holding on to food that they could never eat and giving up their freedom when all they had to do was let it go. I'm saying to you, pull your hand out of the trap of your past and let it go. And remember this, your future is still good. Issue from the heart.